I want to tell you about a moment, a single moment, that lasted maybe 30 seconds. A group of young men in expensive suits, walking through a corporate office building on a Friday afternoon, laughing, loud, the kind of laughter that wants to be heard, that announces itself. That says, look at us, look at how well we are doing, look at how far above certain things we are. And the object of that laughter, a man in grey work clothes pushing a mop bucket down the hallway, head down, moving steadily, not reacting, not looking up, just working. His name was Joseph Elias. He was 41 years old. He had been cleaning that building 5 days a week for 6 years. And the young man laughing the loudest, the one who turned to his colleagues and made the joke that made everyone else laugh harder, his name was Preston Hale, 28 years old, Junior Vice President of Sales at one of the fastest-growing marketing firms in the city. Sharp suit, sharp watch, sharp sense of where he stood in the world and where everyone else stood in relation to him. Preston Hale was going places. Everyone said so. Preston Hale believed it completely. And on that Friday afternoon in the spring of 1994, he looked at Joseph Elias pushing that mop bucket, and he laughed, not quietly, not privately, loudly, publicly, with the specific cruelty of someone who has never considered that the person they are laughing at might one day be in a position to remember it. Joseph heard it. He always heard it. He just kept moving, head down, mop bucket wheels squeaking on the polished floor. Because Joseph Elias understood something that Preston Hale had not yet learned, that where a person stands today has very little to do with where they will be standing in 10 years. This is the story of both of them. And I promise you, by the end of it, you will never look at the person doing the work that nobody notices the same way again. Joseph Elias was born in 1953 in a small city in Georgia, the eldest of 6 children. His father worked 2 jobs his entire adult life, days at a bottling plant, evenings doing maintenance work for a property management company. His mother worked at a school cafeteria during the week and took in ironing on weekends. Between them, they kept 6 children clothed and fed and in school. Not comfortably, but completely. Joseph grew up understanding work the way some children understand language. Instinctively, completely, without needing it explained. You worked because that was what kept the lights on. You worked because that was what kept the family together. You worked because stopping was not an option that existed in the vocabulary of the household he grew up in. He was a decent student, not exceptional, but attentive, disciplined, the kind of student who does not skip assignments and does not cause trouble and gets overlooked in the way that quiet, consistent students get overlooked in classrooms, that reward the loudest voices. He graduated high school in 1971, did 2 years at a community college studying business administration before family circumstances required him to work full-time. He did not finish the degree. He always intended to go back. Life did not make that easy. He found work in facilities management, not glamorous work, not the kind of work that impresses people at parties, but consistent, and Joseph was consistent. He spent his 20s and 30s moving between facilities management positions, office buildings, healthcare facilities, a university campus for 3 years. He learned things along the way that nobody was teaching him officially. How buildings work, how large organizations actually function at the operational level, how the people at the top depend, completely, invisibly, daily, on the people at the bottom to make everything possible. He observed this with the same quiet attention his father had brought to every job he had ever worked. Not with bitterness, with interest, with the specific curiosity of someone who is always learning, even when nobody is paying them to. By 1988, Joseph was working as lead custodian at Meridian Marketing Group, a growing mid-sized firm in Atlanta. 40 employees when Joseph started. Growing fast. The kind of company that was hiring aggressively and promoting quickly, and filled with young people who believed they were part of something important, which they were. Joseph cleaned their offices every night, emptied their trash, maintained the bathrooms, kept the floors clean, made the building function. Without him, and the 2 people who worked under him, the polished professional environment that Meridian Marketing Group projected to every client who walked through their doors would not exist. Joseph knew this. He did not expect anyone else to. Preston Hale was born in 1966 in suburban Atlanta. The only child of a successful insurance executive and a mother who managed the household with the same organizational precision her husband applied to his business. Preston grew up with advantages, real ones, good schools, family connections, a confidence that came from never having had to seriously question whether things would work out. They always had. He was bright, not the deepest thinker in any room, but fast, persuasive, the kind of person who wins arguments not always because they are right, but because they are more energetic about their position than the person on the other side. He graduated from a good university with a business degree in 1988. His father made a call. 3 weeks later, Preston had an interview at Meridian Marketing Group. 2 weeks after that, he had a job, junior sales associate. He was 22 years old. He was good at the job. Not exceptional, not yet, but good enough that the right people noticed. He had a natural charm with clients, a genuine enthusiasm for the work that clients responded to, and a hunger to move up that his managers read correctly as ambition rather than impatience. Within 3 years, he had been promoted twice. Within 5, he was a junior vice president. At 27, in a company that was now 120 people, Preston Hale walked through those offices with the specific energy of someone who has succeeded faster than they expected and is enjoying every moment of it. He knew everyone by name, or rather, he knew everyone whose name mattered by name. The clients, the senior leadership, the people on his team. He knew their assistants by first name as well, because his father had taught him early that assistants control access and should be treated accordingly. But the cleaning staff, the facilities people, the man with the mop bucket, Preston Hale had never learned their names. They were not relevant to where he was going, or so he believed. The moment happened on a Friday afternoon in April 1994. Preston was walking with 3 colleagues from a successful client presentation. They were celebrating, not formally. In that specific way that young successful people celebrate, loudly, in motion, already moving toward the next thing, while still savoring the current one. They turned a corner in the main corridor, and there was Joseph, pushing his mop bucket toward the men's restroom at the end of the hall. Grey work clothes. Steady pace, head slightly down in the focused way of someone doing their job. One of Preston's colleagues, a man named Davis, made a comment under his breath, quiet enough that only the group heard it. Something about the mop bucket, something diminishing. The group laughed. Preston laughed with them. And then, because Preston was always the one who escalated, he added something. Louder. Must be nice, he said with a smirk. Simple problems, simple solutions. The group laughed harder. Someone else added something. The laughter grew. It echoed in the corridor. Joseph did not stop walking, did not look up, did not change his pace or his expression. He turned into the men's restroom and the door closed behind him. The laughter continued for another few seconds. Then the group moved on, toward the elevator, toward Friday evening, toward the next thing. Preston did not think about the moment again. Not that day, not that week, not for years. It was nothing. A 30-second joke in a hallway. The kind of thing that happens and disappears. Or so he thought. What Preston did not know, what none of the people who walked past Joseph with polished shoes and expensive suits ever thought to consider, was what Joseph Elias did after his shift ended. Every night. For 6 years, Joseph left the Meridian building at 11 p.m., drove home, ate whatever his wife Margaret had left him in the refrigerator, and studied, not casually, with the same disciplined focus he brought to every floor he had ever mopped. He had enrolled in a night program at a local college 3 years after joining Meridian. The business administration degree he had started in 1971 and never finished. He was going to finish it now. It took longer than it would have taken a younger man with fewer obligations. He had children, a mortgage, a wife who worked full-time at a medical office. He studied on weekends, during lunch breaks, on the bus when the bus was an option. He finished his degree in 1992. At the age of 39, nobody at Meridian Marketing Group knew. Nobody asked. Why would they? He was the janitor. But Joseph was not finished. He enrolled in a certification program in facilities and operations management. Expensive, demanding, requiring hours of study and practical application he completed while still working his full shift. He finished that in 1993. And then, with his degree and his certification, and 6 years of intimate knowledge of how Meridian Marketing Group actually functioned at every operational level, Joseph began writing a business plan, not for a cleaning company, for a full-service facilities management firm, the kind of company that contracts with mid-sized businesses to handle everything related to the physical operation of their offices: cleaning, maintenance, security coordination, vendor management, compliance, the whole thing. Joseph had watched mid-sized companies like Meridian struggle to manage these functions efficiently for years. He had watched from the closest possible vantage point, the floor level. He had seen what they did wrong. He had seen what they paid too much for. He had seen where the gaps were, and he had spent 6 years figuring out how to fill them. He showed the plan to 2 people, his wife Margaret, and a former supervisor from the university where he had worked in the 1980s, a man named Gerald who had gone on to run a small business consulting firm. Gerald read the plan over a weekend, called Joseph on Monday morning. "This is real," Gerald said. "This is actually real." Joseph had known that. He just needed someone else to confirm it. "I need to stop here, because I want you to hold 2 images in your mind at the same time. Preston Hale, walking down a corridor laughing at the man with the mop bucket, believing completely that the distance between them was permanent, that the hierarchy of that hallway was the hierarchy of the world, and Joseph Elias, going home that same night, sitting at the kitchen table after 11 p.m., working on a business plan that would one day employ people like Preston. 2 men in the same building, living in completely different realities, one of them performing success, one of them building it. If this story is speaking to something in you, subscribe to Ember and Echo right now. We tell stories like this every single week. Real people, real lessons. The kind of wisdom that changes how you see every person you encounter. Subscribe, it is free. And now let us watch what happens when those 2 realities collide. Joseph Elias left Meridian Marketing Group in December 1994, 8 months after the hallway incident, not because of Preston, because his business plan was ready. His savings, built carefully over 6 years of 2-income discipline and minimal spending, were enough to cover 6 months of operating costs. He had 1 contract before he officially opened, a small accounting firm downtown that Gerald had connected him with, 5 offices, 12 employees. Not glamorous, but a start. He registered the business, Elias Facilities Management Solutions. He and Margaret worked together those first months. She handled the administrative side in the evenings after her regular job. He handled the service delivery himself during the day, 7 days a week. No days off, no complaints, because Joseph Elias had never been afraid of work. What he had been afraid of was working without direction, and now he had direction. The accounting firm contract went well. The client referred him to another firm in the same building. That firm referred him to a third. Joseph handled each new client with the same meticulous attention he had brought to every floor he had ever cleaned. Not because cleaning was his goal, because standards were his standard. Whatever the work was, it was done completely. It was done right. It was done on time. And people noticed. The way people always notice when someone genuinely delivers what they promise. By the end of 1995, Elias Facilities Management Solutions had 7 contracts and 3 employees. By the end of 1997, it had 22 contracts and 11 employees. The company had expanded beyond cleaning into full facilities management, maintenance coordination, vendor oversight, compliance management, everything Joseph had outlined in the business plan he had written at his kitchen table after 11 p.m., while the rest of the building he worked in slept. He was not famous. He was not wealthy in the way that makes news. But he was building something, real, solid, his. Preston Hale's trajectory at Meridian Marketing Group continued upward through the mid-1990s. He made vice president at 30, a significant achievement. His income grew. His lifestyle expanded to match. He married well, bought a large house in a good neighborhood, drove the right car. He was doing everything the way it was supposed to be done. And then, in 1998, Meridian Marketing Group was acquired. A larger firm, national reach, significant resources. The kind of acquisition that sounds like good news in the press release, and destroys middle management within 18 months. Preston survived the first round of cuts. He was valuable. His client relationships were real. But the second round, which came 14 months after the acquisition, was less discriminating. Redundancies were eliminated. Preston's role was one of them. He was 32 years old, with a large mortgage, a lifestyle calibrated to a senior salary, and a resume that was impressive, but existed entirely within one company that no longer needed him. He spent 4 months looking. The market was less accommodating than he expected. His network, which he had believed was extensive, turned out to be deep but narrow. Most of his relationships were within Meridian, or with clients who were loyal to Meridian rather than to Preston personally. He found a position eventually. Smaller company, lower title, reduced salary. He took it because he had to, and spent 18 months there telling himself it was temporary. Then the company downsized. Preston was let go again. He was 34. The confidence that had carried him through his 20s was no longer automatic. It required effort to maintain. Effort he was not always able to produce. His marriage became strained under the financial pressure. The house became a source of anxiety rather than pride. He had spent a decade performing success, and had not built enough underneath the performance to sustain it when the performance stopped being supported by a salary. He spent 6 months unemployed, sending applications, going to interviews, hearing nothing, or hearing things that were not what he needed to hear. His father made a call. 2 of them. Neither produced anything. His father's network was in insurance. Preston's expertise was in marketing. The overlap was not sufficient. Preston sat at his kitchen table one evening, the kitchen of the large house he could no longer afford, and looked at a list of companies he had not yet contacted. Elias Facilities Management Solutions was on the list, a mid-sized company that had been growing steadily for several years. They had posted a position for a business development director. Preston did not know the company. He researched it, found that it had been founded in 1995 by a man named Joseph Elias. The name was familiar in the way that names sometimes are, without being immediately placeable. Preston sent his resume, got a call within the week, was invited to interview. He drove to the Elias Facilities Management Solutions office on a Tuesday morning, walked through the door, and stopped, standing behind the reception desk, speaking to an employee about something operational, was the man from the hallway. The grey work clothes were gone. He was wearing a good suit now, not showy, but quality, the kind that says, "I have arrived here through work rather than performance." Joseph looked up and recognized Preston immediately. Preston felt the floor shift beneath him, not physically, but in every way that mattered. Joseph showed Preston into his office personally, not with coldness, not with the specific satisfaction of someone enjoying a reversal, with simple professional courtesy. He offered coffee. Preston accepted. They sat across from each other. Joseph looked at Preston's resume for a moment, then set it down, and looked at Preston directly. "I remember you," he said. Preston nodded. He had known from the moment he walked through the door that this was coming. "The hallway," Preston said. "At Meridian." "Yes," Joseph said. A pause. "I owe you an apology," Preston said. He had been composing it in the car on the way over. But sitting here, in this office, across from this man, the composed version dissolved. What came out instead was simpler and more honest. "What I said that day was wrong. It was cruel. And I have thought about it more than you probably know." Joseph looked at him for a long moment. "I believe you," he said. Another pause. "Can I ask you something?" Joseph said. "Of course," Preston said. "What did you think I was?" Preston looked at him. "I thought you were—" he started, then stopped. "I thought you were permanent," he said finally. "I thought the distance between where you were and where I was fixed, that it was just the way things were." Joseph nodded slowly. "And now?" Preston looked around the office. At the company that had not existed when Preston was laughing in that hallway. At the evidence of everything that had been built while Preston was performing. Now I understand that I was the one who was temporary, he said quietly. Joseph picked up the resume again. Read it carefully. Set it down. You are qualified for this position, he said. Your experience is relevant. Your client background is useful. Preston waited. I am going to give you a fair interview, Joseph said. The same interview I would give anyone. He paused. But I want to be honest with you about something first. Preston nodded. Every person in this company, from the newest cleaning technician to the senior managers, is treated with the same basic respect. That is not a policy. It is how this company was built. By someone who understood what it felt like to be looked at the way you looked at me. He leaned forward slightly. If you join this company, that is the standard, without exception. Preston held his gaze. I understand, he said. Good, said Joseph. He stood and extended his hand. Then let us begin. Preston got the job, not as charity, not as revenge fulfilled, because he was genuinely qualified, and because Joseph Elias had built a company on the principle that people are more than the worst moment the world has seen from them. Preston worked at Elias Facilities Management Solutions for 4 years. He was good at the job. The client development skills that had made him valuable at Meridian translated well to a company that was growing and needed someone who could open doors and build relationships. He was not the same man who had laughed in that hallway. Not entirely. People do not transform completely, but they can change the things that matter most. And Preston, having experienced what it felt like to be on the wrong side of assumptions about a person's worth, never made that mistake again. He learned the names of every facilities technician in the company, not because it was policy, because he finally understood what names mean, what it means to be seen, what it costs when you are not. Joseph told this story once, years later, to a group of young professionals at a business event. Not to shame Preston. Preston had given his permission, not to celebrate himself, but to make a point that he believed needed making. He said, the man who laughed at me in that hallway was not a bad person. He was a person who had never been taught to really look at the people around him, to consider that the person doing the work nobody notices might be the most interesting person in the building. He paused. I was building a company while I mopped those floors. Not everyone is, but some people are, and you will never know which ones unless you learn to look. Joseph and Preston's story is not really about reversal. It is not a story about karma or justice or the satisfying feeling of watching someone get what they deserve. It is a story about 2 things that matter far more than that. The first is this. Where a person stands today tells you almost nothing about where they will be standing in 10 years. Joseph was pushing a mop bucket. He was also completing a degree, writing a business plan, building the foundation of something real. None of that was visible from the outside. None of it was announced. It did not need to be. It just needed to be done. And it was being done, every night, at the kitchen table, after 11 p.m., while the people in the polished offices above him were sleeping. The second thing is this. How you treat people who can do nothing for you is the truest measure of who you are. Preston treated Joseph the way he did because Joseph could not help him, could not advance his career, could not impress his clients, could not add anything to the life Preston was building. Or so Preston believed. And that belief, that the value of a person is determined by what they can immediately do for you, is one of the most expensive mistakes a person can make. Because you never know. You genuinely never know. Who is going home after their shift and building something at the kitchen table? Who has a degree you do not know about? Who has a plan you cannot see? Who will one day be sitting across from you with the power to say yes or no? The person pushing the cart, the person cleaning the building, the person whose name you never learned because you decided they were not worth knowing. That person has a life outside of what you can see, a full, complicated, rich life, with history and intelligence and capability and plans. Treat every person as if their story is not finished, because it is not. Yours is not either, and the chapter that comes next, for all of us, is not written yet. Closing, 43 Ender. I think about Joseph pushing that mop bucket, about 30 seconds of someone else's laughter, echoing in a hallway, about a man who heard it and did not react, did not stop, did not look up, just kept moving, head down, wheels squeaking on the polished floor, going home that night to his kitchen table, his coffee going cold, his business plan getting one page closer to finished. I think about what Joseph understood in that hallway that Preston did not. That dignity is not given by the people around you, it is carried inside you, and no amount of laughter in a corridor can touch it if you do not let it. I think about Preston in his car on the way to that interview, composing an apology, not knowing if it would be received, knowing only that it needed to be said. And I think about the specific courage that requires to walk into the office of someone you wronged, to sit across from them and say, "I was wrong, I knew better, I should have done better." Both of these men taught me something. Joseph taught me that the work you do in the dark is just as real as the work anyone can see. That building something quietly and building it well is not less valuable because nobody is watching. That the mop bucket and the business plan can exist in the same life, and often do. Preston taught me that it is never too late to learn to look, to see the people around you as full human beings rather than furniture. To understand that every person you encounter is somewhere in the middle of a story you do not have access to, and to treat them accordingly. Whoever you are watching right now, whatever work they are doing, whatever it looks like from where you are standing, you do not know what they are building. You do not know where they will be in 10 years. You do not know what they understand that you have not yet figured out. So treat them well, not because it might benefit you one day, although it might, but because they are a person, and that is enough.